Hi everyone, welcome to another Bowls Australia Zoom catch-up, and do we have a special guest for you today? We are catching up with none other than Andy Thomson MBE, a star of the world bowl scene for the last 2-3 decades. How are you, Andy?
I'm very good, Clive. Nice to speak to you.
Yeah, look, we thought it was a great opportunity to catch up with you, obviously in the role of tactical coach for the BCiB Australian Jackaroos, and appointed in the lead up to the 2022 Commonwealth Games, of course, being held in Birmingham.
Yes, looking forward to it. I mean, basically the story really is that a couple of years ago, Steve Glasson approached me and gave me the opportunity of, do you fancy actually working with the Australian team? And I thought, wow, that's some job opportunity. And he said, look, don't rush into it, take your time, have a think about it. And I did. I took a few months. I spoke to a few people who I had a lot of respect for in the game. I won't mention them, but I asked them, their advice and what they thought about it. And quite simply, every single one of them says, look, you have been given a wonderful opportunity, you should grab it. And there's no doubt about it that I was convinced even when Steve asked me. But, since being with the team and since that, I'm delighted to be part of it.
All right, well, we'll explore that a bit further as we go through, but let's look at you as a player. I think most bowlers would be pretty familiar with the name, but of course you're a world champion both indoors and outdoors multiple times, and over that long career, we won't dwell on the length of the career, shall we? but it's been certainly at the top of the game for so long. And also in Australia, you've been down to Australia a few times and performed well.
Yes, I've been to Australia a few times. Actually, I started a few years ago, actually, in fact, probably in the early 80s. I went down there went to actually New Zealand with David Bryant, Julian Haynes, and Pip Branfield, who actually went to a tour in New Zealand. So that was my first experience in the Southern Hemisphere. And we then actually went from New Zealand to Tweed Heads, and we played against an Australian test team. So that was my first experience of Australia, and obviously, I've been back a few times and had success as well. It's been quite good for me. Australia has.
Oh, very good, very good. And of course, you've played a lot of representative bowls for England. You started in Scotland and played some juniors for Scotland as well, and then moved into the English ranks, and that's where a lot of your international representative bowls has gone on. Talk about that, and also these people that you caught up with to ask for their advice. Any little jibes that you're getting involved with the Australians?
No, I mean, I think everybody was good really about it. I mean, obviously, as I say, the Australian players have been great. I mean, I know a lot of the more experienced, Kelvin Kirkhouse, Ian Shoebacks, and obviously I knew Steve very well. So, I know these players, but the current players, I knew quite a few of them as well. But I got a bit of a ring, shall we say, obviously from some of my English colleagues about the job when it came up. But I think they're all quite happy for me, really.
It's good to see. I'll tell you what, before we get into the actual role and so forth, give us a picture of what's going on over there at the moment. So, here in Australia, our numbers have been quite low in regards to the COVID virus and so forth, and it almost looks like we might be transitioning out of some of our restrictions, cautiously, of course. Give us the picture over there. Of course, we only get what we hear in the news, and we know the PM even contracted this virus. What's everyday life looking like over there at the moment?
Well, we're currently in lockdown. So we've been in lockdown for about 6 or 7 weeks. So the situation is not really great, if we're being honest about it. We're confined to our homes most days. We could go out for 1 hour per day. But, you listen to politicians, you listen to scientists every day, and they're telling us that things are improving. And I think they are generally. I think we're expecting a big statement this coming weekend, I believe, as to how the lockdown will progress, and that will be interesting. And I think everyone is quite anxious, and everybody's just anxious to see if we can get some sort of reality back to our lives. But that is going to be, I'm afraid to say, probably a good few months yet.
Okay, so in terms of a bowl season and so forth, that would be kicking off pretty soon normally. Would that be the case?
Yes, we would be probably starting now. We tend to start the end of April, beginning of May, so really now. So, most people would be out in the outdoor greens now, enjoying our very, very lush greens, as you know what they're like, obviously, over here. They're not, at this time of the year, they're a bit heavy. But yes, it's you know, and we're all experts and we're all trying to think when are we probably going to get back to our clubs. My guess is possibly July, maybe if we're lucky, possibly get some play in July. The competitive season is really finished, unfortunately, so I don't think there'll be a lot of competitive goals, but if we can get a couple of months into the season, I think most people would probably be quite happy with that.
Okay, and how are clubs coping and so forth? Do they look like they're going to get through this period fairly well? Is there assistance over there for the clubs?
Yes, I think there is some assistance. I think Bowls England have been in touch with a lot of clubs and Bowls Scotland as well, and all the associations really in the UK. I think they're trying to give as much assistance as they can to the clubs. I mean, I think it is quite difficult. So the clubs are really just being left to their own devices. And, you know, again, it's just about how they could manage it. And it is quite difficult. But, you know, the season here is quite short outdoors, and the clubs are only open for 4 or 5 months, and they've got to try to make some money during that period. And unfortunately, the green has still got to be maintained, but there's no money coming in. So I think it's quite hard times for bowling clubs.
Yeah, pretty similar challenges worldwide, no doubt. So let's get into your role with the Australian Jackaroos. And I guess you get asked to perform a role like this, tactical coach. You've got a very successful Jackaroos team at your fingertips that have been performing fantastically over the last 2, 3, 4 years and beyond that, with mainly those performances being Southern Hemisphere performances. So what do you see that you can bring to the table that will help with the performances, say, in the Northern Hemisphere?
Well, I think it's fair to say that you're right, what you say, as far as the Jackaroos coming over here have not performed well. I mean, if you look at the last 2 Commonwealth Games here, back in Manchester, I think Karen Murphy got a silver medal. The last time that was Manchester, and then obviously in Glasgow in 2014, they got 3 medals, I think it was. One para, I think the paras got a medal as well. So they only got 4 medals. So I think from an Australian perspective, they would have expected better. And I think Steve Glasson realised that as well. And I think that was one of the reasons that Steve talked to me, is that he felt as here, coming to the Northern Hemisphere, it's tougher, it's harder. And you know, I'm quite into sport as well. And, you know, I look at, for example, tennis, and I look at people like Djokovic and Federer. Now, when they go to the French Open, they've actually won about 20 Grand Slam titles each. They've won the French Open once. So therefore, what happens when top players go to different surfaces? And the French surface, if we're talking about tennis, is slow. And it's very much like here. When they come to the UK, it's slow. So how are they going to adapt to that? And that's really what I'll be looking at. You know, what we talked about last year when the Jackaroos came over.
So you know you've got the talent. Is it purely a tactical thing? Is it playing the right style of game? I know from being over there myself and talking to some of the players over there that were in Glasgow, and said that they didn't necessarily agree with the way Australia went about it, with you know, perhaps a focus on reaching the head and things like that. What sort of twist do you put on that?
You know, I've actually looked at, and I know the World Championship team this year will probably be different to the Commonwealth Games team, but who are obviously going to compete in the World Championships next year. I think, looking at their styles, the men, for example, I think 4 of the men have got a British style delivery. I think, you know, the 3 Aarons, is it what? Tees, Wilson and Sheriff. They've all got a British style of delivery, you know, they tend to run off the bat, which I think will be good, and I think they'll serve them well here. I think the only one I think is Barry Lester. Barry Lester's style is more static, it's more an Australian style delivery. I think, again, looking at all the women players, I think all the women players selected for the World Championships, they have all got Australian style deliveries. So perhaps they might just have to adjust a little bit.
Okay. All right. Interesting stuff. So in terms of how they're going to develop, in terms of looking for venues to practice and so forth, what's your advice in that space?
Well, I think obviously, as you know, the Australians who were planning to come over here in July. Unfortunately, they're obviously not now. There's no doubt about it, they will be over again next year. And I think it's really a case of, you know, I think as a coach or as a practitioner, I think you've got to listen to the players often. And I think it's important that coaches do listen to players and get their opinions on how they view the greens. You know, people talk about coming to the Northern Hemisphere and the greens being heavy. And yes, they are heavyish, but they're not really as they are, shall we say, at the moment. The greens at the moment will be very, very heavy. Now, the Australian team, when they come over, they won't play in these conditions. You know, it won't be as slow as that for them.
Give us a typical speed, just so people at home that are watching this can relate. What would be the typical speed right now, and then what would you expect to happen, say, at the Commonwealth Games?
Well, right now they're probably running about maybe 9-10 seconds, very, very slow. I mean, I must admit, I actually find it quite difficult, me myself personally, when I start the outdoor season now. I find it extremely difficult to get them up. You almost feel as though you're throwing the ball as hard as you can to get them up the green. So therefore, I could sympathise with the Australian players who are all playing on 15, 16-second greens, coming over here and adapting. I'm exactly the same at this time of the year. I find it quite difficult to get them up. It's a feel. It's almost, you know, anybody could throw the ball up fast. It's actually being able to throw the ball and being in control of the ball, really.
So in terms of your experience in Australia, you were obviously doing the opposite. So you were coming off slow greens and moving to faster greens to come over here and play in Australia. What sort of things did you do in preparation? And is it attitude? Is it those sorts of things? You've got to get it right in your head in terms of the way you're going to approach it?
Yes, I mean, if I revert back to what I talked about earlier, you know, when I went to New Zealand with David Bryant and in the first part of my career, we went to New Zealand. The greens in New Zealand were running about 19, 20 seconds. Now, I found that really difficult. I really did. You know, that was my first experience abroad, and that was so difficult for me to adapt. And I talked about the styles of delivery of the Australian team. I had to change my style of delivery. You know, I have got a lot of body movement, my legs, etc. So I had to adapt, I had to change, and therefore there was no body movement when I had to play in New Zealand. So therefore, when I went to the Southern Hemisphere, I just slightly altered my delivery action a little bit. You know, I talked about David Bryant, and everybody knows about David Bryant. If you watch David Bryant, when he played outdoors here in the UK, at the start of the season, he would change his delivery style. He was upright. However, when David went to the faster greens, he was more semi-crouched. So people have just got to slightly adapt their delivery action a little bit, depending on the conditions.
So that's the delivery side of things. What about the tactical side and the style of play? Does that change as well?
I think, first of all, I mean, I know that obviously when the team came over last year, and I know they've been over the last 2 years, I think one of the things that we talked about initially was the choice of bowls. And I think the choice of bowls is an absolute key area, because I know that most of the Southern Hemisphere players all play with narrow bias bowls. And therefore, coming over here, that is number one. And I think that was one of the things that, first of all, I think we had 1 or 2 problems even initially last year. Players were chopping and changing. Players couldn't really get to the bowls that they quite liked the best. I know R&T's, he mucked about quite a bit in trying to get the right set, and he ended up with an old black set of bowls, which I know he won't play with come next year, you know, when he comes next year for the tour. So I think that is number one. I think that's number one, is getting the correct choice of bowls. And once you get that, then we talked about the tactics. And I don't think there's a great difference. I think there's just 1 or 2 tweaks, perhaps. And I don't think tactically, I think they'll get used to the slower greens, and they'll get used to playing the shots that we play here. I'm well aware that your greens are faster, so it tends to be more of a draw-drive game. We're a bit different here. We're slightly different.
And that's in terms of those landing shots and just landing balls to the jack high, trailing jacks, things like that.
Yes, the most common shot here is the yard-on shot. It's quite a common phrase that we use. We want you to reach through with a yard-on. That is a shot that we play a lot, because our greens allow us to play that. They allow us to play that type of shot. And I think that is, but to be fair, I think, watching the boys last year and the girls, they played that shot well.
So let's talk about that involvement that you've had so far. You were going to be coming to Australia for the World Championships. Obviously, we know that's now postponed until next year, pretty much the same time next year. Obviously, there's a bit of time to pass before then, but would you still expect to be involved when that rolls around again?
Yes, I mean, I think it's all about, you know, I think Steve wanted me to come down, really, to me, get involved with the players, get to know the players, get to know them, all aspects about them, you know, how they handle themselves. Everybody's different, and that would have been interesting for me just to find. I mean, I know that the majority will come over again next year to the UK, but it would have been nice to see them all, and you know, and that's something that you know, I'm missing out a little bit. But you know, I do communicate. I mean, the communication, as you probably know, with the Australian team is phenomenal. I wake up every morning, and I would say just about every single morning I'm waking up, and there are correspondence from Steve and everyone. It's just phenomenal. We have conference calls every week. It's just fantastic. It's just, well, the thoroughness and the professionalism is just off the planet, basically.
Yeah, I guess the success is no fluke, is it? And that's when you build that sort of culture in your team, it breeds success.
Yes, it does. It does. It's extremely professional. It's well managed. It's well. Everything is good about it. They've got a good backroom staff. I mean, you'll know Gary Willis, who's obviously assistant to Steve, and Gary's a great bloke. So, you know, I will be obviously working with these two chaps, and just, they're a good team. There's a lot of good players, but obviously these are the two that I'll probably be speaking to most to, are the two senior coaches, really.
All right. Now, other events that you've been involved in, I believe you had some involvement with the World Under-25s with Mason Lewis and Jess Seesamawebe. Did she teach you how to say that surname, by the way, or?
I'm glad you say it. Anyway, we'll call her Jess, but Jess was very impressive. She lost in the final, and very, very close. She lost to the girl from, I think it was it Papua New Guinea? I think it was. I can't remember. But anyway, she lost in the final. She's very, very talented player, and Mason very good as well. Mason was unlucky not to come out of his group, but I wasn't exactly sure. You know, Kath Greenslade, she came over, and Kath was good with me as well. She played a big part as well, and making sure everything was organised. And she left all the tactical side, etc., to me. But two talented players, and I'm not exactly sure where I don't think they're coming to the UK next year or this year. But yeah, very talented, and I'm sure it's just a bit like us, a lot of strong under-25 players.
I was going to ask about that actually, the situation over there with the development of players and so forth. How is the bowl scene over there going?
Bowl scene's good. I mean, obviously, you talked about under-25. I do manage the England under-25 team, so I'm involved with the indoor team really, probably more. Obviously, I'm not involved with the outdoor team. But also over here is different, I think it's probably fair to say. I mean, I think from the indoor point of view, we have the World Championships, which is a fantastic tournament, really good. Everybody likes to play in that one. That unfortunately, I think from an indoor perspective, that is just about the only major tournament that we have from a TV angle. Unlike you boys, I mean, you've got the BPLs and the UBCs, which are two great tournaments, and you're involved with them, obviously, as well. So, and outdoors, we tend to really focus more on our counties and our clubs, hopefully qualifying for our national finals. So it's more, I would say, from a profile point of view, it's more about the indoor game.
And of course, we saw the World Indoor Championships were brought to life, so to speak, online with the viral shot of Nicky Brett, that draw shot. I want to ask you two questions. How hard has Nicky Brett been to keep quiet? The fact that his shot went viral, and secondly, is it the shot you would have played? Let's talk the tactics.
Well, obviously, Nicky, I mean, I know Nicky very well. He's one of my good friends, one of the selectors, in fact, of the junior team. But he's the best player. I think he's the best player, probably him and probably Paul Foster. I think they're the two top indoor players really currently at the moment. And Nicky, obviously, yes, that was a big shot, and you know, he's quite a good character as well, Nicky. So I think he took it, and you know, it was water off a duck's back, shall we say, to Nicky. I don't think he was overly concerned by publicity. He handled it well. Would I have played it? I mean, if I was leading like Greg Harlow was, I would have just given him the choice. and he fancied it. He was drawing so well that he fancied the shot, really. So if somebody fancies the shot, allow them to play it.
Yeah, what a shot it was. So what's next for you? What's next for you, Andy? What's coming up, mate?
Well, obviously, outdoor season's going to be fairly quiet. You know,
Yeah.
I'm disappointed because I still play. I still play, obviously, and so I'm missing out a little bit on that. But you know, I understand that you can't be doing everything really. So I will take my time. I'm doing a bit of decorating. I'm doing a bit of gardening. So it's keeping me busy. But I think from a bowls angle, it's more looks at the indoor season, and I've qualified in a few nationals. So hopefully they might take place sometime in September. So that's the plans really for the next few months, and then we'll just see really how the season develops.
Well, I can't think of a more qualified person to be involved with the Australian Jackaroos team. Andy, you're a star on the bowls scene for so many years, and now you're giving back to the sport in a coaching and a tactical way. I think it's fantastic. So we really appreciate your time catching up with us.
Good, Clive. I really enjoyed it. So if you want any, give me a call in a few months' time, see where we are. But yeah, it'd be nice to catch up. But yeah, thanks very much, Clive.
Hopefully we can see you down in Australia soon enough when we can all get back to a bit of normality, eh?
Thanks. That would be great. Thanks, Clive.